The new sense of urgency in Iraq and a nuclear showdown with North Korea, we've assembled the four most powerful members of the U.S. Senate on national security. From the Foreign Relations Committee, Republican Chairman Richard Lugar and Ranking Democrat Joe Biden. And from the Armed Services Committee, Republican Chairman John Warner and Ranking Democrat Carl Levin, who's nursing his wounds in Detroit after Game 1 of the World Series. In any case, Senator Warner, have we now reached a tipping point in Iraq where President Bush's open-ended commitment to creating a unified, stable, democratic Iraq has to be reconsidered?
I think the administration is constantly revising and looking forward. This article in the New York Times and in other periodicals posts so, it does indicate clearly the forward thinking of the administration working with the government of Prime Minister Maliki. I stress, we've given sovereignty to that country. You said starting up the government or whatever. That government is up and functioning. Our job is to keep it moving forward. But the key to this thing is impressing upon that government that they've got to come to grips with what is causing this increase in violence and killing both Iraqis and our own armed forces, which incidentally, I just got back, are doing a brilliant job, our troops. It is Maliki, you've got to come to grips with the private militias and get them out of business so that you're moving forward as a government unified and not the government of Sadr or Hakim or the Kurds. It is one government, united, bringing about peace and stability for that country.
I want to get back to that in a moment, but let's do a whip around of your three colleagues. Senator Biden, time are we at a tipping point? Are we at a crossroads? Do we need to change policy?
It was time to do it 2 years ago. What the president's calling for, or at least what appears to be the case, of consideration of benchmarks, the United States Congress voted on about a year and a half ago, and my good friend, the chairman of the committee, took a Democratic proposal and made it better, which basically called for the same thing. The truth of the matter is there's a need for a radical change in policy. There's a need for a political solution in Iraq and a bipartisan solution here at home. Without those two things happening, there is no possibility, in my view, we succeed in Iraq.
Senator Lugar.
I think it's important to stress another dimension, and that is 40 to 60% of unemployment in Iraq. The oil production is going down, and there's corruption there. In essence, even if you had a military solution or stability, it's not really clear how people pay for their government, physically how it continues on. And therefore, as a part of the planning, we're going to have to rethink the reconstruction of the country. And in a way we haven't. We've sort of zeroed out in appropriations this reconstruction group at the State Department, even though the Defense Department is willing to give us some money. That's a critical element of this, because the stability of this is going to come about when people are employed. Iraqis are employed, reconstructing their country. Quite apart from the division of the oil money, if there isn't very much oil money, that becomes academic. And I just stress that as a part of this planning.
Senator Levin?
Well, the administration has refused to consider changing course for the last couple of years, although it's been obvious that the violence in Iraq has been increasing consistently. The killings have been increasing, and yet when we call for change of course, as we have for the last 2 years, to put pressure on the Iraqis to work out their political differences, since our leaders in Iraq tell us there is no military solution, there's only a political solution in Iraq, and the leaders in Iraq have got to work out those differences, or else the killings will continue and the violence will continue. Every time that we Democrats and a few Republicans call for a change of course, instead of the president's bumper sticker, stay the course, stay the course, stay the course, we've been labeled as cut and runners. And I don't know if this administration is finally listening to what the reality is and recognizing the reality, but I hope so. And we shouldn't wait till the end of the year to come up with milestones. We ought to be doing that now. We should have done it long ago, and we shouldn't wait until after our elections are over to tell the Iraqis that we are going to have to tell them, we're going to have to set a time when we're going to begin to leave Iraq, because without that pressure of our troops leaving Iraq a few months down the road, the Iraqis are not going to do what only they can do, which is to work out those political differences.
One of the things that strikes me in listening to all four of you is you talk less about the military situation and more about the political situation. I want to ask you about that, Senator Warner, because there were a couple of developments this week that I'm sure all of you thought were pretty troubling. One was that Prime Minister Maliki said that he wants to delay taking on and disarming the Shiite militias until the end of the year or sometime next year. We also had this kind of remarkable event where the U.S. arrested one of Muqtada al-Sadr, the radical Shiite cleric's top aides, for supposedly being involved in death squads, and then Maliki put pressure on the U.S. to release him because he didn't want to confront one of the main supporters of his regime, namely Muqtada al-Sadr. Question. Do you still have confidence that Prime Minister Maliki is strong enough, tough enough, willing to do what needs to be done to bring this country together?
I think we have no other course but to give him our confidence and our support. I thought Rumsfeld spoke very toughly yesterday or the day before. He said, better that you get this done now than later. I mean, it was tough talk. The president has been very forthright and tough on Maliki. You've got one other fact that you should know about. Maliki went to see Sadr and Grand Ayatollah Sistani just 48 hours before there was a Shia upon Shia fight down in Amara. Now that's clearly showing that his conversations with those two people were not fruitful. You've got to hold him to it. Maliki has to give more authority to the Iraqi army. Our professional, I met with him yesterday at the Pentagon, have a degree of confidence in that army if they had more authority, more leeway to make decisions, and it is their job, not the U.S. coalition forces, to subdue and get rid of these private militias.
Senator Biden, do you still have confidence in Prime Minister Maliki?
I remember I was on your show and I came back after meeting with him in July and told you then I had no confidence in him. I have no confidence in his ability and possibly his willingness to deal with taking on that Shia coalition. When I was down in Basra over the 4th of July, British general telling us it's not about an insurgency in the Shia region. It's not about a civil war. It's about a group of militia competing for control of that region. And without a political solution, Chris, without giving the Sunnis a piece of the oil action, without following up with what they've already done under their constitution, call for a federal system. They've already voted for a system to allow federalism. Without us making that work, helping them make that work, I don't know how he can do much of anything. I don't even think his inclination is to do much of anything.
But let me ask you a question. I mean, we'll get into the partition idea, which I know is one of your big proposals in a moment. If he's not the right guy, and he was the one who was elected by the various elements in the National Assembly, what do we do?
Well, what we do, remember when the president made that secret trip over and they met with him, and I remember I was on a sister show of yours, and they showed me a picture of the president whispering in Maliki's ear, and they said, what do you think of this? I said, it depends on what he's whispering in his ear. If he's whispering in his ear, we support you, we're in trouble. If he's the president's whispering in Maliki's ear, look, Jack, let's get something straight here. You got to deal, I'm serious, I'm not joking, you got to deal with the militia and you've got to give the Sunnis a piece of the action in terms of the oil revenue, so there's a political solution here. Absent that, you're in trouble. So we are now seemingly beginning to say that to him. A little late, but he's the only horse in town and they elected him.
Senator Lugar, do you have confidence? Do you still have confidence in Prime Minister Maliki?
Well, I think he's probably the best horse to ride on in the situation. The predicament is such, as Maliki looks at it, that the Kurds are in favor of democracy generally, but polling in Iraq indicates that very conflicted on democracy at all with regard to the central part of the country, and Sunni areas don't like democracy. And as a matter of fact, sort of across the board, people would like a strong leader, strong in quotes, which is not Maliki. Maliki comes to us, I'm told, a phone call with the president, wanting assurance that we're not going to displace him. But the fact is that we don't have anybody to displace. I mean, we're talking about putting pressure on Maliki, but he doesn't have much clout. Now, we probably need to think through how we, the United States, can give this Prime Minister more clout, because he can't
How do we
really
give him more clout?
Well, that's a very good question, but it's a political question once again. Physically, how does our ambassador, how does the president, how does the Secretary of State, anybody weigh in? because we keep saying go to your Shiites and get them straightened out.